What's the most stupid thing you've seen a grown-ass adult get angry over? Story 1. At the gym, this guy was rotating between 3 machines. 2 of them were side by side, and the third was a good 30 feet across the room. A single cycle took him at least 20 minutes. I was eyeing one of his machines whilst I squatted. Finally, I had nothing else to use, so I asked him if he was done. He looked up from his book, Tom Clancy, and said, "I'm using that, okay? Wait your turn." Before I can even think of responding, a huge dude asks him if he could work in. The guy immediately smiles and goes, "Oh, sure thing, my dude." And the big guy gestures for me to use the machine I asked for and leaves. Dude looked so pissed. I kept thinking he would lean over and hit me with his book. Story 2. I answer 911 calls. One day, we had a fatal car crash happen and had to reroute traffic from the main road down a side road, then back up to the main road. A woman who lives on the side road called 911 asking why there was commercial traffic passing through her residentially zoned home. I explained there was a serious car accident on the main route and that as soon as that was resolved, the detour would be removed. She continued to complain, very angrily, that the trucks going by her house were kicking up dust and pebbles into her driveway and demanded we send someone to clean it up for her. I said, "No, we don't do that." She demanded to speak to a supervisor after. I got all her information, then I told her he'd be alone to speak to her in person after he was finished informing the family of the person who died in the car accident that their family member was dead. Then I hung up the phone. When the sergeant got there, she refused to come to the door and refused to answer the phone when we called her back. Story 3. A longtime parishioner made a scene before the morning service when she spotted a family sitting in her pew. As I noted some time ago, she insisted that the family move or that she'd leave the church and take her substantial pledge with her. To their credit, the family, newcomers to the church, didn't move and the woman left in a huff, much like a child having a tantrum. Story 4. I work as a barista at a coffee shop. One day, this dude comes up and wants a filter coffee with almond milk at exactly 47 degrees. And I did exactly that. A few seconds later, he loses his mind and complains that the drink is wrong. I asked him what was wrong with it, and he replied, "Well, no," he basically shouted and insulted me, that the drink was 1 millimeter too high. I was like, "What?" He asked if only retards work in the coffee shop, as it's very easy to see the line in the cup he brought with him. He said this has never happened to him, he feels insulted, so on and so forth. I had tried to calm him down, but he insisted I get the manager. My manager came and banned him from entering the store ever again. Story 5. Literally anything with traffic. In multiple places, honking can basically mean you want to fight. My aunt had a guy get out of the car and start banging her car and screaming because she passed him. I've had people throw their cars in park because I honked after realizing they wouldn't look up from their phones after sitting at a green light. Stop being a dick when someone calls you out for being a crappy driver. I once had a cop get mad at me for legal incorrect use of my horn. I rounded a corner and found what turned out to be an unmarked cop car in the middle of the road, no lights or hazards on, talking to another stopped driver through their shared driver's windows. This isn't all that uncommon in rural areas, but if they're chatting, I know they probably can't see me. So I slow down further, drive along the shoulder, and tap my horn before passing, which is what you're supposed to do. It's a polite, "Hey, I'm here and passing you," and has always got me a polite wave of acknowledgement. This time, it got me pulled over, a lecture on quote-unquote etiquette, and a ticket for speeding, which I wasn't, and improper horn use. At least it ended reasonably well. Turns out what I did is explicitly mentioned as an example of appropriate horn use in the local law, and the judge didn't buy that I was speeding because the cop admitted to the conversation and didn't like the question. How did you observe the defendant speeding if you were involved in a conversation at the time? For my attorney. Story 6. Went in with some friends to New York City in the first couple of weeks of December to do some Christmassy things in the city. One of those things was to go to FAO Schwartz, but because there were so many other people trying to do the same thing, we had to wait in line. It was a 50-minute wait in line and we were queued up. The line wrapped around the block and in that time, we got to yuck it up with the people in line with us. I turned around to say something to friends, then turned back around to move forward and noticed 2 strange women ahead of me that were not in line a moment before. I turned back around to give my friends a "you seeing this crap?" look at the woman that cut when a guy with a stroller tried to brush past me. I stopped him in his tracks by standing in front of the stroller. I told him that the back of the line was down the block and about a 40-minute wait from our current spot. He just looked at me like I was the asshole and said, "Thanks for the information, but I'm trying to get to the rest of my group," while nodding to the women that cut the line when I wasn't looking. The people ahead of us that we had been joking with heard the commotion that I was making and started in on the women that cut the line. The guy was looking angry and angrier as he kept trying to get past me, and finally the line as a whole managed to get the line cutters to shove off. As a group of line cutters was leaving, the guy looked back and shot me some colorful comments about the quality of my character and left. Yeah, I don't care that you were upset that I wouldn't let you, your infant, and 2 women in tow cut the line. Story 7. A friend of mine got seriously hurt off of a 50-plus foot ski jump trying to avoid this 6-year-old girl hanging out in the blind landing. My friend is on the ground, crying with his broken leg and ribs, and the father of this girl had the audacity to stand over him and start screaming at him about how he could have killed his daughter. The 6-year-old hung out in a blind spot where professional athletes were training. The mass of the park surrounded this guy quickly, told him they better never see him in a terrain park teaching his daughter how to ski on the landings of massive jumps, and proceeded to escort him and his daughter down the mountain. The idiot almost got his daughter killed, permanently injured my friend, and then decided to scream at an injured person who just hurt themselves to save his daughter's life. And before any other skiers call me or my buddy or anyone else out there, this was a very secluded and secured area, but somehow this dad and small daughter ducked a ton of fences to go hang out in the landing of a very large jump. There were spotters, and somehow this lovely duo came out of nowhere to go have fun on the landing, and no one really thought to be looking for random little kids breaking into the park. Story 8. A flight has to emergency land. A few years back, I was on a flight to Florida when about halfway through, the oxygen masks deployed. Thankfully, we didn't have to use them. The captain made an announcement that there was a problem with cabin pressure and to expect a few minutes of a bumpy ride while he descended to a safe altitude. A man sitting in the row in front of me yelled out, "Oh, come on." Now, I'd been staring at the back of this man's head through the seat gap for most of the flight because he had a rat tail, and I had not seen anyone with this hairstyle since the early 90s, so I was transfixed. Shortly after, the captain came back on the speaker and said we were going to be landing at the closest major airport to change planes and to prepare for landing, so seatbelts on, trays upright, etc. And Rat Tail Dude was pissed and began loudly ranting to the point that 2 flight attendants had to come over to him. In the next 2 minutes, the entire plane learned his life story and the reason he was going to Florida. His wife cheated on him, and he met a woman on a dating website he was going to Tampa to meet for the first time, and the best part, she's pissed she has to get me from the airport as it is. She barely has enough gas to get to the airport, and now because you people feel like switching planes, she's going to run out of gas waiting for me in the pickup area. The poor flight attendants kept trying to explain to him the plane may have a small leak, so it was crucial we landed as quickly as possible, and it would not take long to deplane and switch aircraft. During this time, the pilot came on the speaker twice, telling the flight attendants to take their seats for landing, but the dude was so out of control it was risking their safety. He would not stop. He told the FAs and, well, everyone, that it was crap, there's no problem, if there was, we could just keep on oxygen masks the entire time if we needed them, and, quote, there's probably not even a problem, I bet the pilot just has to take a poo and doesn't want to do it on the plane, unquote. By now, all of us around him were telling him to stop, and one of the flight attendants told him if he continued, he would not even make it to Florida since he wouldn't be allowed to get on the new plane because he was so out of control. Thankfully, he stopped yelling, and the flight attendants were able to get to their seats but continued to mutter to himself as the plane landed, and we were pulling up to the gate. They kept him on the plane as everyone else was getting off. I was sitting in the airport by the gate with everyone waiting for customer service to tell us more info about getting on the next plane, when I saw 2 airport/state police being led onto the jet bridge. Unfortunately, I didn't see him get off the plane as we were moved to a different gate, but it felt really good knowing that this total jackass wouldn't be making it to Florida to meet his internet love. His antics and loud mouth put the flight attendants in danger and stressed out other passengers in an already tense situation. It amazes me that people like that exist and believe that a plane with a potential problem might continue on if you just put up enough of a scene. Story 9. I worked at an auto parts store for a while. We'd get middle-aged dudes who'd get mad at us for not looking for parts that don't exist for their cars or for simply asking them to clarify what they're working on. It's incredibly disheartening to see a grown-ass man throw a hissy fit all because he doesn't know what kind of car he has. Story 10. I worked at a bookstore in high school, and every winter we have a book drive and ask customers if they'd like to donate a children's book when they are checking out, and usually people say, no, sorry. But one guy would not stop going on and on about how if he wanted to buy a book, he'd just keep it, not donate it. So I replied, okay, you don't have to donate, and proceeded to move on in the process and tell him his total. And he just kept circling back to how ridiculous it was that I was asking him to donate a $4 book to kids in schools who couldn't afford them up until the moment he left. He's the only person I ever thought was an ass for not donating. Story 11. A guy with his kids inside a McDonald's, which was inside a Walmart. He brought his order back to the counter and asked a pregnant cashier who doesn't get paid enough to deal with what he ordered. His attitude started out calm enough, but anybody who has worked food service long enough could tell he was going to be one of those customers that just blow up in a rage after they've made their point. He explained that he had ordered a different sandwich, and she replied that no, he ordered what they had given him. He was shouting and swearing. A manager got involved and told him they would just give him the money back. And so he took his money back, aggressively of course, and said to his kids in a loud and self-righteous tone, "Come on kids, let's go to a real McDonald's." Bro needed to get over himself. Story 12. Once a woman sent her two 5 to 8-year-old kids into the PopUp Halloween store I worked at with her debit card so they could buy whatever they wanted. The son, of course, immediately has no idea where the debit card is, calls his mom, and mom comes flying into the store literally screaming at the top of her lungs that I specifically must have stolen it because I was both the floor supervisor and cashier at the time. Told her there were cameras pointed at each register and I hadn't moved from my station for over half an hour, but I would help her look for it. She didn't believe me and called the cops on me because it now was an accusation of employee theft. Even though I was the only one accused, none of the employees were allowed to leave the building. It took the police 20 minutes to show up, way past closing, and we were all miserable and we just wanted to go home. All I could do was apologize profusely. We couldn't even stand outside because she was there, standing directly in front of the doors, staring through the glass at us with unbridled fury. A single cop finally showed up and she already looked fed up. She took all of our statements, looked over the CCTV, and told the woman to deactivate her card and go to the bank in the morning. The woman finally left, threatening me the entire time, and the cop hung out with us for a couple of minutes and made fun of the whole situation. Real chill lady. 10 minutes later, as a cop is scooping up her paperwork, the phone rings and my coworker answers. It's the woman. She found her card. It was on her kitchen table. She forgot to give it to her son. She tried to ruin a young 20-something's life because she refused to believe she could be so careless with her own money and didn't even think to check her own house first. She never apologized. Story 13. Not having a specific toy, Hatchimals, in stock at the store I work at on Christmas Eve in 2017. We got those freaks in almost every day and they sold out within a couple of hours of being opened without fail. Now this witch was having a full-on hissy fit because we ruined her daughter's Christmas. No, Tracy, you ruined her Christmas. It's not our fault we don't have any in stock at 5:30 p.m. the day before Christmas, you space cadet. Story 14. My dad is a angry dude. He's been to court-ordered anger management a few times and has been kicked out of places a lot of times. So there are way too many instances to list. I'll tell a couple though. Once we were out to eat, our waitress looked at my baby sister and made a comment about how cute she is. Dad flips the hell out and starts screaming about how he didn't say she could look at his baby. We were asked to leave. Another one that sticks out is Christmas. My parents are divorced and the custody order said we had to go back to my mom's house at a certain time. That time rolled around, we reminded our dad and he started yelling about how we're dumb people. Fun times growing up. Story 15. I used to work in a deli, and one time this lady came up asking for cheese slice thin stacked on top of each other. I thought to myself, how else would I stack it? But sliced the cheese and went to hand it to her. She lost her ever-loving mind because I didn't stack it right and made me re-slice the cheese thinner and way over-stagger the slices. All while berating me and telling me how awful I was at my job and how she knew the owner and was going to tell him how awful I was and how bad my attitude was. Luckily, my manager stood up for me when the owner came to talk to him. The dumb old bitch made me cry first thing in the morning. Another time, I had a guy freak out over the price of bologna. One type was on sale and one type wasn't, and he wanted the type that wasn't for the price of the one that was. When I told him I couldn't do that and got my supervisor to back me up, he screamed at both of us and called us stupid, uneducated women. So glad I don't work retail anymore. Story 16. Back in the mid-90s, I worked the morning shift at a 7-Eleven. I went in at 4:30 and got everything started, and we opened at 5. It was always a madhouse between 6 and 9 when people were coming in for coffee or whatever food we had on hand. People were rude and messy and treated the people who worked there like crap, but one day their king came in. Now, in case you've never gotten coffee at a convenience store, let me explain the layout. There are a bunch of coffee pots with various levels of caffeination and flavors. Alongside them are sweeteners and things like half and half or powdered creamer. In the mid-90s in Virginia, the choices weren't vast. One thing we never had on the coffee bar was actual milk. So this guy from New Jersey comes in one morning around 7 a.m., right in the middle of the busiest time. I know he was from New Jersey because he kept telling me that while having a fit. He bypasses the line to come to the counter to let me know there isn't any milk at the coffee station. I finish up with my current customer, apologize to the guy behind him, and go over to the coffee bar where there are roughly a billion little containers of half and half. I turn to New Jersey and tell him that they're right here. He immediately gets angry. I said milk. So I apologize and explain to him that this is the creamer we offer, either that or the powdered kind. As I feel I've given sufficient explanation of what we offer, I head back to the register so my coworker isn't completely overwhelmed. Once again, he ignores the line and comes up to the counter. This time his face is red and he has angry eyes. New Jersey. You're going to get some milk for this coffee. Me. I'm sorry, sir, we don't have milk. What we have over there is all we offer. New Jersey. If you don't go over there and open one of those gallons of milk, I'm going to come across this counter and whip your ass. I'm from New Jersey. Now, I'll be honest, I was scared. At this point, the manager comes out of her office to deal with a guy. It was crazy busy, so I have no idea what actually happened to the guy. I did end up quitting that week. A 7-Eleven job isn't worth being threatened over milk. Story 17. A roommate once cursed me out because I asked him to contribute to the house's petty cash fund, which would be used to purchase dish soap and toilet paper. You know, $2 a month for those things we all use. Long story short, this roommate opted out of contributing to the fund. He was asked by our other roommates and me to make his own arrangements. A few months later, our pipes clog and we have to call a plumber. We were in a service corps and thankfully didn't foot the bill. Turns out this roommate chose to tear pages out of a book to wipe himself, and that contributed to the clog. Story 18. I was at the post office just before Christmas on my lunch break. As you would imagine, there was a big queue. Just as I was only 2 people away from the front of the queue, a guy came in, saw the huge queue, and joined it with much huffing and puffing. So after 2 minutes, he suddenly said, "I'm in a real hurry. Does anyone mind if I go to the front of the queue?" And without giving anyone a chance to reply, he immediately made a move to push to the front of the queue. I was annoyed by this, so I said, "Hang on a minute, I'm in a hurry too, and I've been waiting here for 10 minutes, so you aren't going in front of me." He rolled his eyes and went to go directly behind me, so the lady behind me said, "I'm in a hurry too, you can't go in front of me either." Then the bloke behind her said the same, then so on until everyone in the queue had said he couldn't go in front of them, so he was back where he started. He stood at the back of the queue for a few seconds with a look of absolute fury on his face and then loudly said, "Screw it, I'll come back later. Thanks a lot for being unhelpful, everyone," and stormed out. What a wanker. Story 19. One time, a lady asked if she could skip me in line, and I said, "Sorry, but I'm on lunch and need to get back." She turned to the person behind her and started saying, "Look at this kid. Well, let me cut him in line because he thinks he's more important than I am." Right, I'm sure you have places to be, lady.